talking about it, but David, King David, when he started out in our world, Bible world, he was fought Philistines, right? And then here we go. You know, I was listening to devotionals when I thought about this morning. David's been in king for a long time now. Fought enemies of Israel for all these years. And then we come to this text, which we're not going to get to today, but I thought I'd mention it. Guess who he's fighting with in our text? Philistines galore, giants. You'd have thought, if you just read through it, before you got to that part, that they was done with the giant thing. But they weren't. Here they are. Into David's career, kingship, fighting giants. But we all know how that turned out. And one of the reasons I thought about it is because I have heard people say, today there's war in Israel, fighting them on the Gaza Strip. And, well, that's the ancient Philistines. No. Now, that's where the ancient Philistines lived. They were a part of the Gaza Strip, that whole coastline there. That was theirs, They're Arabs. The people in the Gaza Strip are Arabs. Palestinians are Arabs. They're not Philistines. They're just occupied Philistine property. But them old Philistines are gone, right? But there is one thing you can say. Israel has got enemies, and they always have, and they always will. It's just they're occupying the old Philistine lands right now. They're pushed off into Philistia, but one of these days the Lord's going to come down personally, take care of all of that. I seen a map of Israel and their enemies, and Israel was painted blue, and all the enemies were painted red or purple or something like that. But anyhow, it started out, a close-up of Israel in their little blue area, and then it began to pan out. Pretty soon, that little blue speck was nothing. It was just all red. They are surrounded by Islam. That's by Muslims. Everything in the red was Muslim. That little bitty nation, that little speck of land is just totally surrounded by Islam or Muslims, Arabs, more or less, Arabs and Persians. So, Israel's always had an enemy. In the 1940s, a guy came along named Hitler. Y'all know who he is. There wasn't even an Israel in his day. But he hated Jews, and he tried to exterminate Jews, right? What do they call that, a genocide? I hear genocide in the news now. Well, the Jews are guilty of genocide. Do you people even know what things are? Do you know what a genocide is? How about this? Get train cars full of people and go and kill them in gas chambers. That's a genocide. When you round people up in cages, so that in order to kill them, get rid of them off the face of the earth, right? That's genocide, and Israel ain't coming close to doing any kind of genocide over there in Israel. The people that are dying over there that are Palestinians, that's collateral damage from war. And from what I've learned, there's been more collateral damage in all the wars, in any of the wars that we've had in the last 100 years. There's been more collateral damage than Israel is having in that little Palestinian area with 2.5 million people crammed in. So they're doing a pretty good job of not killing people compared to most wars. I think the old ancient Philistines are gone. That Gaza, that was a Philistine area, Gaza. Matter of fact, that was King David's stomping ground. Remember when King David was a little nuts, running around hiding from Saul? He was down there a lot in Gaza. So, but they're Arabs. But I will give you this: they're enemies of Israel, and Israel's always had enemies since the very beginning of their creation, right? And they're always going to have enemies. And just when you think Israel is on their last step, which they thought that in the 1930s and 40s because of all the genocide and, extermination of Jews and all that. But here they are. A nation of 8 or 9 million people, right? In that old same area that they were 2,000 years ago. But when you see them on their last leg, when they're done, when they've had it, when Israel's done for good this time, when they have parties, they're good. When the world is saying they're done, no more Israel. Ooh, better watch out. Somebody's going to have something to say about that. If I've learned correctly, it's the Lord.
Amen.
The creator of this universe, the creator of heaven, the creator of earth, the creator of everything out there, the creator of molecules, air, wind, fire, the creator of everything is going to have a little say in that. If I was this world, I'd be thinking about getting on board with him. You'd think, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead, they want to exterminate his people, them Jews. Now, you're his people, right? Because you're a child of God. You're believers. Believe in Jesus, right? Right now, there's more of that people that believe in Christianity than in Islam right now. But I understand that scale is starting to flip-flop. So, like Sister June says, just got to let the Lord handle it because we can't handle it. You think we can get you think I have the answers, Steve Crawford, of what the Israeli-Arab problem, how to settle that? You think I could do as good a job as the Lord? No? Do you think you can? Well, if people just listen to me, okay, that may be true, but let me tell you, if God's got a handle on it, leave it alone. He's got a handle on it, right? But I just thought I'd bring that up. Here David is at the end of his reign, not the end, but towards the end of his reign, throwing down with the Philistines again. We thought they were done, right? Thought Israel was done in the 1930s and 40s, right? But here they are, 2024, 8 million of them, with a military of 300 to 400,000 men. Wow. So you ain't done until God says you're done. And so, anyway, that was all free. That was all from the devotional. I read the devotional and thought about it a lot. And I got to thinking about all these Philistines and causing David trouble after God established that kingdom for all those years, the kingdom of Israel. But know this, the Palestinians and the Gazans are not Philistines, they're Arabs. And people try to tell you they're of the old ancient Philistines. No, they're Arabs. They're Islamic Muslims. Probably a lot of Persians mixed in on that, Babylonians, but all right. Today's lesson, David's kingdom restored. Restored from what? I think we left last Sunday school lesson where was David? Running for his life across the Jordan River up to Mount of Olives all the way, running across the Kidron Valley up to the Mount of Olives all the way down to the Jordan River, right? And then I think we finished with a battle. But you thought David was done, right? I mean, they cleaned out the palace. They ran like they were scared, run for their lives, barefooted. Some of them didn't even have time to put shoes on. And then that's all going to be restored. You'd have thought David would have been done after that. But no, you are not done in this life until God says you're done.
Amen.
I kind of went through a little spell of that. Before I became pastor here, before I started here, I thought I was done health-wise. had some brain injuries, and so I was having seizures, and I was having the heart troubles, congestive heart failure, and I just didn't think I could do it anymore. I kind of started looking for a place to go to church, and the number one thing on my list of priorities for going to church is the pastor had better be a good theologian. Well, guess what? I say stumbled, but I came to this church just out of pure curiosity, because I fished down here below Millwood Dam for all them years. I fished down here and drove by this church house. And I saw there was a Missionary Baptist church down there, and I thought, one of these days I'm going to go to that church, because I'm Missionary Baptist. One of these days I'm going to go to that church down there by my fishing hole. And when I was young, I thought, I want to pastor that church just by my fishing hole. Parsons down here somewhere, I could go fishing down here below the dam every day. Just kidding around, right? But later on in life, 30 years later, I says, I'm going to that church just because I've never been there. And we were visiting churches all over. I was having them health issues. And then there was, I'll be a prolific theologian here. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise. I had no idea. I didn't know who was pastoring this church. We just walked in and sat down one time and listened to Brother Ike speak and gave a Sunday school lesson, and then he preached. Just one time, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, because there's not very many theologians like that in the world. So I thought, I'm done. God's done with me. I can't even string together a sentence hardly anymore. I had to get help out of a pulpit to my car. Couldn't make it. So church people had to help me to my car up in Cove, and it was getting like that every time I preached. So I thought I was done. So I thought I'd come here, and I love this church. People here, they just kind of grew on me real quick, and the theologian, the preacher, was good theology, good preaching. I thought, well, there I'm going to be the rest of my life, retired, kicking back, and God's done with me, but I'll do what I can for this church. And look here, I've been teaching, preaching here for 2 years. Yeah. In that pulpit right there. I see what I'm saying is you ain't done till God says you're done. When you think you're done, you really don't know, do you? But God knows everything.
Amen.
So until y'all start helping me out of this pulpit to my car again, because I can't walk anymore, you're stuck with me. I don't know if that's good or bad for you, but you know what I mean. But David might have thought, ain't a bit of telling what was going through his mind when he was on the run from his own son, who had that his own people. Judah turned against him. I don't know how much of that we're going to get into in the lesson today, but without going through with David's mind, first of all, he didn't want his son to die. Second of all, what's going on? Am I not king anymore? But we learn from this lesson that God ain't done with David. And David is going to suffer turmoil and trouble like that, soap opera type trouble until the day he dies. Until he has his son Solomon anointed king, he has trouble in his kingship. But the title of the lesson is David's Kingdom Restored. That means after his little thing with Absalom, where he had to run for his life up into the mountains, right? Well, is God done with me? Well, we're going to learn today that he's not. We just read about, Arthur just read about all the trouble that after this they had with the Philistines. So God wasn't done with him. My deal is you ain't done until God says you're done. And I have an ideal that you ain't done until you're dead. I mean, think about it. How about when are you going to be done? When's God going to be through with you? Well, you can say that for sure when you're dead, God is through with you, right? You can say that. But then your works will go on for a long time even after that. So David's kingdom was restored. Key verse, page 60. And he bowed the hearts, and he bowed the hearts, and he bowed the hearts of all men of Judah, even as the heart of one man. So that they sent this word unto the king, Return thou and all thy servants. So the king returned and came to Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to come meet the king to conduct him over Jordan. So everything happened, the battles happened. Absalom is dead. David's mighty men are still mighty. They were mighty the whole time, right? So all that's taken care of. This little uprising is done, and the people of Israel asked David back. So anybody telling what was running through David's mind, but they went and asked David back. That's what that's all talking about. I'm glad they did that. Application. The student will determine that God's plans for him are always best as he trusts God by faith in spite of failures. In spite of failures. Whoop. What's a failure? I blew it. What's a failure? I messed up. I messed up so bad that I'll never come back from this mess up. Things were said, things were done, things happened. What a failure. God can bring you back from failures, right? But there's one thing you have to do. David wrote Psalms during this period that he was running, and even afterwards. He just kept trusting in God. Didn't do anything rash. So we have to keep trusting in God, even despite our failures. Do you know why? Because God doesn't fail, but you do. I don't. Steve Crawford don't fail, right? I don't have failures, just you do, right? No, but you understand, we fail as human beings. We fail miserably, and God knows that. And God can recover you from your failure. I mean, he recovered David from his failure. David was king until he died, right? Early 80s, I think. Did he even make 80? I'm not real sure. Now, it wasn't a life. It wasn't as victorious of a life as he had when he was young. But he failed miserably, and there was God taking care of business right till the day he died. All right. Seeking the context. Page 60. We're often quick to criticize our national leaders when the Bible instructs us to pray for them. Ruh-roh, boy, is this preacher meddling? The guy who wrote this quarterly, is he meddling? Quick to condemn when the Bible teaches us to pray for them. Does the Bible teach us to pray against leaders?
Nope.
It teaches us to do what? Pray for them. I'll just leave that between you and God. If God can use a donkey to fulfill his will, can he not use any man in office? Liberal, conservative, woke, even a person in office who don't know whether they're a male or a female. Can God not use one of them as well? He can. He's God. He can do anything. He can make things happen in anybody's life. Remember when Jesus died, one of those guys that condemned him said these words. Doesn't the Bible say that somebody must die for the people? And the Bible teaches that, and I'm paraphrasing. And yet, he was one of the enemies of Jesus Christ who said that. So pray for the leadership. Not that they can, not that they'll prosper and live good and healthy and long lives. I mean, do you want somebody living a long, healthy, rich life who is very undeserving of it? No, pray for them that God, pray for them that God will use them in a positive way. Ways that you and me, you and I cannot comprehend. We can't, but God can comprehend it. He can use that. Those people can make decisions. Now He won't force them to make decisions against their will, but yet He can somehow, through His ways, influence them to make a decision that might help God's people. Actually, how about this? Help His plan. He has a plan, right? If we've read correctly. Y'all read the book of Revelation? Last book written. The Apostle Paul didn't read the book of Revelation. He didn't have it. He died before it was written. But you can see where God it has a purpose for His people, and He has a way that He can bring things about that me and you can't. So can we at least pray for our leadership? What do you pray for? That God will use them for His purpose, for His honor, for His glory, for His ultimate outcome. That's what you pray for. Now, pray for them on one hand and crucify them on the other. I don't think that works. If you're crucifying them, my friend, you're not praying for them. Trust me on that one. You can't do both. That doesn't mean the decisions and the things they say don't bother you. You know, we live in a world where the things they say don't make sense sometimes, and just the scruples, it just don't make sense. God help them to fulfill His will, your will. Make the decisions according to your will. Now we got, war is about the most serious thing in the world, right? If I learned correctly, what's that nation over there Russia's fighting? Ukraine? Have lost 300,000 men to this war. Can you wrap your brain around that? 300,000 lives dead, probably evaporated by some bomb. And then the Russians have lost, from what I heard, 50,000. Some say 200,000. You don't know, whoever sides the media is on, you can't trust the media, right? But what I'm saying is, how many of those people have died, right? There's a war going on over there right now in Israel, right? That fought in the Gaza strips. Like 500 or 600 Israeli troops have died in the last 100 days fighting war. Apparently, thousands upon thousands of Palestinians, or not Palestinians, Gazans have died. It's brutal. Have y'all seen that on the news? You ever see Israel drop it? You ever see them bombs? You see people down there and then all of a sudden bomb hits, it just evaporates them. I bet you can't even find pieces to bury, a deal like that. That's the most serious thing in the world. And you know who makes the decisions about war? People who are above us, who are in positions above us. Our leadership. Do you make decisions about war? Do you decide who goes? How many of those 300,000 men who have died over there in Ukraine, did you sign on for that? No, you didn't. But the leadership of you and me make those decisions. Now, if God has a plan, and I believe He does, God knows everything, and God's working it all out. How about this? Pray for the leadership that God will use them to make decisions for Him, for His will, right? Can we not do that? We ain't got very far into this lesson, right? That's the first sentence, wasn't it? This could be also said of our school leaders, business leaders, and church leaders. Trying to lead a group of people is likely the hardest thing we will ever try to do. There are always hard decisions to be made, and leaders need God's guidance to make these decisions. Let us pray for our leaders. Amen to that. You not feel like that some politicians are over their head, in over their head? You listen to them talk. You listen to them give speeches. If they leave the written part of their speech even for a second, they say things that are just strange, or they're over their heads. But that's the world we live in. You know, every culture is built by hard-working people, and they end up, having good rulers. But then inevitably, once it pegs out, gets to the top, bad rulers come in and destroy. Is America any different? Is America's going to last 1,000 years? You know what? You ever heard of Hitler? You ever heard of the 1,000-year Reich? Y'all heard that term? 1,000-year Reich. You know who coined that term? Hitler. You know what Reich means? Reign. That's German. We say reign, like, king reigns. 1,000-year Reich is the 1,000-year reign. Hitler thought that what was that party? What were they? Nazis? They thought the Nazi party, based on all the money they had, and all the war machine they had, and all the soldiers they had, and all the technology, they thought they was going to have 1,000-year reign. How long did their reign last? Less than 10 years. Done. If you're a Nazi today, you're on the radar of the federal government. Nazis hide. Nazis keep their mouths shut. But nations build, nations become strong, but then inevitably people get in office, leadership gets there that have no business being in there, they don't even know what government is. They're in it. Well, if I ain't careful, I can get into politics right here. I try to leave politics out of my Bible teaching and preaching. But know this, pray for them. Pray that God will use them to fulfill His will, and then pray that you can be in God's will. God, help me to be in your will. Well, let me tell you something. Crucifying your leadership and praying for them on the same time, does that put you in God's will? No, it's God's will for you just to pray for them. I ain't saying condone what they do. Touchy subject. It's political. All right. Got through the first paragraph. Next paragraph. Leading a nation is hard enough, but David had made it doubly difficult by sinning against the Lord. The Lord brought troubles on David and the house as judgment against his sin with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah. We'll hash all that back out, right? Many of David's troubles were self-inflicted, but Israel had a reputation of being a stiff-necked and disobedient people. Just as Moses, Numbers 11:14, David is well known for writing many complaint psalms. And here's one. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed before him my trouble. That'd be Psalm 142:2. And I wonder if many of the complaints were linked to the efforts to lead the nation of Israel. In today's lesson, we will observe David's emotional turmoil over the death of his son and struggle to know what to do in difficult circumstances. Israel was still torn apart because of Absalom's rebellion, and before we end, we will see another uprising against David. Oh, the trouble King David faced. Bit of an understatement. Don't y'all love to read 2 Samuel, the beginning of David? You know, the end of the Judges, and then here comes Saul and David, and the triumph at David, and all of a sudden, now what are we reading? Oh my goodness gracious! Does it not sound like a soap opera? What do they make soap operas for? Why do people enjoy watching them? Because they love to see the other people struggle, and get past our struggles and then struggle again. Right? We almost wish we didn't have to read this about our blessed King David, right? The holy man of God. The writer questions in bold red letters with 2 lines to answer. How can you pray for the leaders of our nation, our schools, and our churches? What a question. How can you? Well, I think I can answer that with these 2 lines. How can you do that? By the grace of God. How can you pray for somebody who don't deserve it, who haven't earned grace, who hasn't earned mercies, who don't deserve it? How can you pray for them? First of all, by knowing you didn't. You haven't earned it, grace. You haven't earned mercy. And so, by the grace of God, you can pray for those people to receive the grace of God. That's how you can do that. 5 minutes searching the text. David mourns. And it was 2 Samuel 19, 1 through 7. And it was told Joab, behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom. And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people. For the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son. And the people got them by stealth that day into the city, as people being ashamed steal away when they flee into battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. And I can only imagine your child being killed in a terrible way. And Joab came to the house of the king and said, Thou hast shamed this day the faces of thy servants, which this day have saved thy life, and the lives of thy sons and of thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives, and the lives of thy concubines. Boy, we could talk a lot about old Joab. Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Let me tell you what Joab was. A politician. And in those days, politicians killed their way out of trouble in those days. Now, how many people has Joab killed? Think about it. People he didn't like. People that got in his way. He disobeyed King David. King David said, the order of the king, don't hurt Absalom. And the Bible says, right, that Absalom, that a tree, if you don't put it right, a tree grabbed his hair and pulled him off his horse. And he was hanging there, and they came and killed him. You know who finished him off? Joab. What do we do, Joab? There's David's son, Absalom. And he's like, kill him. And they said, well, the king said don't. And what Joab do? He killed him. He could have cut his hair and took him down from there, right? Put him in jail, whatever. But no, he killed him. Joab is a politician. In those days, a politician killed their way to their position. They were murderers. Joab, well, we didn't want to get too much on Joab, but Joab came. He's also a wise man, very wise. Joab, he's all that. He's a good politician. He came in. He tells David, man, these people saved your life. They saved your children. They saved your wife. They saved your concubines. Verse 6, in that thou lovest thine enemies and hatest thy friends. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither prince nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all we had died this day, then it had pleased thee well. I will admit, David was emoting. That's just a preacher word for, he was very emotional. He wasn't thinking. You know what happens when you're real emotional? You don't think real clearly. You're not thinking about anything. You're consumed with your emotion. David was consumed with the death of his son. Ain't going to finish But I'm gonna stop right here and finish with this. You know, David had another son that died. And while that child was dying, y'all remember that? Bathsheba's little baby. He was sitting on a pile of ashes, covered in sackcloth, weeping and wailing, and he didn't bathe, he didn't say a word, he cried and cried and cried while that baby was dying. And then when the baby died, what did he do? He got off, went and took a shower, put on some clean clothes, and the people were like, what in the world is going on here? You were crying, weeping, the baby was dying, and now the baby died and you cleaned up and you're ready to go now? What's up with that, David? You know what David said? That's all right. He can't come to me, that baby, but I can go to him. But what happened with Absalom? They killed him, butchered him. And what did he do? Wept. Wonder why? Think about it. One baby died, he quit crying. He says, I'll go to him. But Absalom died, what did he do? You got to wonder if he knew that Absalom was an unbeliever. That Absalom never repented and Absalom never trusted in God, and it broke David's heart. You got to wonder. Right? Forgive me. I thought I got all this out of my system when I looked at it. But you got to wonder why David didn't want Absalom killed. Was it for his own personal benefit? Maybe he understood. Maybe he wanted a little more time to get to him, teach him about God. Huh? But when Absalom died, David wept bitterly. When the baby died, he said, that's all right. He can't come back, but I can go to where he's at, right? So where do babies go? All the aborted babies in the world, when they die, they go to heaven, right? You'll meet him one of these days. But where'd Absalom go? Did he act like a believer to you? Did he act like he believed in God? So, I got a lot of people coming in. I'll close with that. Does anybody have any comment? Let's all stand and we'll be dismissed.